Has anyone ever come up to you and started their story by telling you this? You'll never believe this. You'll never believe this. I came home and my children had cleaned the house and washed the dishes. You'll never believe this. My line manager quit her job today, literally said, "That's it, I've had enough." She grabbed her stuff and she walked out the door. You'll never believe this. I was on a walk in the woods, and as I came around a clearing, there was this hawk, and it swooped down and it caught a little, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a vole, maybe it was a little baby rabbit. I don't know what it was. It flew off. You'll never believe this. You'll never believe this. They've just announced another lockdown in Italy. You see, sometimes we start stories that way. We say, "You'll never believe this." Sometimes the event happens, which is so unbelievable that we tell people up front that they won't believe it. And today is Easter Sunday, and it's sometimes hard for us to get our heads around it. You know, coming back from the dead is the sort of thing that happens in superhero films or fantasy novels. You know, dead people stay dead in real life. And it was just as difficult for the disciples to believe this, that Jesus had come back from the dead. You know, and they were his closest friends. They were his followers. They were with him for every moment. Nearly 3 years of their life they'd spent together. And even they didn't believe at first. They thought it was over. He was dead for good. They'd seen him die. Their hopes were shattered. Their dreams were destroyed. They did not expect Jesus to come back to life. You know, they weren't sitting around with a timer somewhere just counting down the days. So imagine this. If they were expecting him to come back to life, they'd have got together, they'd have gone in hiding, they'd have ordered some pizzas in, they'd have put Netflix on, and then they said, "Alexa, set a timer for 3 days." And then they just wait. No, they weren't waiting around. They were actually hiding because they were terrified. In the book of John, it tells us they were hiding because of fear of the Jewish authorities, and they had locked the doors. They were hiding. They were devastated. They were terrified for their lives. They had given up everything to follow Jesus. You know, Matthew was a successful tax collector. He left a very profitable business behind to throw his lot in with Jesus. We know that Peter, James, and John were all fishermen. They'd left their businesses. They'd thrown in everything to follow Jesus. Maybe they could go back to being fishermen. We don't know what all the other disciples' jobs were, but we know Judas had thrown his lot in, and Judas didn't see another way out. Judas didn't expect Jesus to come back to life. He was so torn up with guilt and regret for what he had done that he couldn't face living anymore, and therefore he took his own life. You know, Judas betrayed his rabbi, his teacher. Judas betrayed his closest friends. Judas betrayed those who were following Jesus and had their hopes in Jesus. And he felt guilty. And he ran back to the chief priests who had paid him 30 pieces of silver in exchange for betraying Jesus. And it tells us in Matthew 27, verse 4-5, it says, he said to them, "I've betrayed an innocent man." The chief priest replied, "What use is this to us?" They didn't want his money back. "See yourself out." And Judas threw the money on the floor. And it says he ran out of the temple. And later that evening, he hung himself. You know, in the first century, suicide was an acceptable way to redeem yourself from a failure and a way to regain lost honor in society. A professor named Elsie Garrison writes about this in her book, Attitudes Towards Suicide in Ancient Greece. Now, see, Judas thought This was the only way out. This was the only way to make up for all of the mistakes that he had made. Judas was not expecting Jesus to come back to life. Judas thought it was over. He didn't believe Jesus was coming back from the dead. And how do we know that the disciples found it so unbelievable? It's because they wrote about it. There's 4 biographies of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all books about the life of Jesus. They're accounts of their experiences with Jesus. And they write with such exposing honesty. They write more honestly about themselves than we probably would. We'd probably write about ourselves in much grander terms, but they write about it and how they didn't find it believable themselves. In John chapter 20, verses 1 to 2, it says this: "Early on in the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and she saw that the stone had been rolled away. So she came running to Peter and John. And she said, 'They've taken the body, and we don't know where they've put him.' 'You'll never believe this. I've just been to the tomb, and the stone is rolled away, and they've taken his body, and we don't know where they've put him.'" See, it had been the worst few days of their lives. And now, to top it off, someone has taken the body. Is this some kind of sick, twisted joke? I mean, who would do such a thing? Where have they moved his body? I mean, who would stoop so low as to desecrate the dead? They were shocked. They didn't expect Jesus to be alive. They were shocked that someone had stolen the body. So Peter and John raced to the tomb. The story continues. They went inside the tomb, and it was as Mary had said, and they believed. At this point, they still did not understand that Jesus was risen from the dead. So what did they believe? They believed Mary. They went into the tomb, as Mary had said, and they believed. They believed her. Oh my gosh, she's right. Somebody has taken the body. They did not expect to find Jesus alive. See, they had seen and heard Jesus get beaten and killed. The disciples are writing about their own experiences, and they're saying, "We ran in there. We did not expect to find Jesus alive. We ran in there to see if someone had taken the body." So Peter and John head back into hiding where the rest of the disciples were. But Mary stayed in the garden. And the story carries on. It says that Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. She's weeping because her whole world has been turned upside down. And as she wept, she stopped to look in the tomb. And when she looked, she saw 2 angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said, "They've taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Mary is not expecting to find Jesus alive. She had seen him die a terrible death. She is upset and heartbroken, and she is distraught that even in death, somebody would mess with the corpse. They've taken him away, and I do not know where they have laid him. I imagine she was just crying uncontrollably and having those kind of short gasps, those sobs that try to catch your breath, you know. And the story carries on, and it says, after saying this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you seeking?" Assuming him to be the gardener, she says to him, "Sir, please, if you have taken him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him." Mary is concerned with the body. If you've taken him away, please, please tell me where he is. Please, please. She didn't recognize that it was Jesus. It says so many times that she's weeping. She's crying. I've had an experience with my own children sometimes where they're so upset and they're catching their breath and the tears are running down their faces and it's messy and it's one of those snotty kind of cries, and they're trying to speak to you like this and you're just trying to get their attention and you just have to hold them for a moment and you say, "Darling, darling, darling." Sometimes you have to hold them because in that moment they're not even rational. They're not even thinking because their emotions have taken over and they're going on. And this is what Mary's doing. She's there. She's distraught. She's upset. She's weeping. And Jesus is standing there. She doesn't even recognize him. She thinks he's the gardener because someone has stolen the body. Someone has taken the body away. And she's like, "Please, please, please, tell me. Tell me where they have put the body." See, this is what she's concerned with. And Jesus says to her, the story carries on. Jesus says to her, like a father putting his arms on his child and just holding them for a moment as they regain their composure and they breathe a bit more steadily. And Jesus says to her, "Mary, Mary, Mary." And she turns and she says, "Rabbi," which means teacher, teacher. Jesus says to her, "Do not cling to me. I've not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brothers and say to them that I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene went. She ran and she announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And Mary believed. She saw with her own eyes, she heard with her own ears, she touched with her own hands, and she runs off to tell the others, "You'll never believe this. I have seen the Lord." It tells us in Luke, when she gets back to the disciples, it tells us these words seemed like idle talk, and they did not believe them. Of course, they didn't believe her. Of course. Peter and John ran to the tomb after Mary told them the body was gone, and they found everything the way that she had said. They saw with their own eyes that the body was not there, and someone had removed the body. So of course, by this point, Peter and John had already gone back. They've told the others, yes, somebody has stolen the body. It's not there. They're probably in that room pacing around trying to figure out what in the world's going on. And then Mary is back. For the second time, she's back. The first time she came all upset because someone had taken the body. This time she's come back, she's all upset because she's now seen the Lord. I mean, what is it? Okay, she's just off her head. Of course they don't believe her. Maybe she's just an emotional woman. I don't know. They just don't believe her. You'll never believe what happens next. Of course, this is why they're hiding out. They lock the doors and they decide to wait it out. It tells us in Luke chapter 24, the disciples were talking about all these things that have been going on, when suddenly Jesus stood among them and he says, "Peace, peace be unto you." And they're startled. And of course, they think they've seen a ghost. And he says, "Why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? Here, look at my hands and my feet. It's me. It's me. It's really me. Here, come. Go ahead. Touch my hands. See for yourself." And while saying this, he showed them his hands and his feet. They still did not believe, but they were in awe. I love it. Understatement of the year. They're startled. They think they've seen a ghost. It's too good to be true. They still don't believe it. Maybe they've not had enough sleep. Maybe they'd eaten too much pizza. They've binge watched. They've just stayed awake too long, watching episode after episode. They're just so fatigued. They're not thinking straight. All of a sudden, they're hallucinating. They can't figure out what's going on. And Jesus has shown up with a great party trick. He's gone through the walls and he says, "Hey, peace be unto you." Okay, they have no idea what's going on. Jesus realizes that they don't believe. And so he says to them, "Have you got anything to eat?" So they give him some fish. And he ate it before them. Jesus is trying to show them that he is real. And that he is really there. You can't touch a ghost. And a ghost doesn't eat. Now we know in the story that there was this guy Thomas. Thomas was one of Jesus' followers. And at the time, Thomas wasn't there with them. We know that because it tells us that he wasn't there at the time. And in John 21, verse 24, it says this, Thomas, also one of the 12, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, 12 closest friends, it says Thomas was not there when Jesus arrived, and the other disciples started to tell Thomas, "We've seen the Lord." You can just imagine. All the others have been telling Thomas what happened. "You'll never believe this, but we have seen the Lord." And Thomas replies like any logical, rational, normal human being would. "Unless I see for myself the nail marks, and unless I put my finger on his hand where those nails were, and touch for myself the wounds on his side, I will not believe." Which sounds pretty reassuring and sounds like a very normal response that any of us would have if they told us someone that we had seen die come back to life. We wouldn't believe it. Let's be honest. We wouldn't believe it. See, Thomas didn't believe all of his close friends. Thomas didn't believe what they were telling him. He had no reason not to trust them, but he didn't even believe them. I don't know if they ever lied to him in the past. Maybe they teased them and joked. Who knows? But Thomas didn't believe them. He didn't believe what everybody was saying. Even though his friends who loved him, his family members who loved him, even those that were in his circle who loved him and cared for him and thought of him as a friend, even those closest to him were trying to tell him something, even then he still did not believe. And maybe you've had experiences like that. There's loved ones in your life and you're trying to tell them about something about Jesus, and they just don't believe. And you know that they should trust you, but you know that also they have to learn to believe for themselves. Or maybe you're like Thomas. Maybe you're the person and your loved ones and your friends around you in your life have been trying to tell you this good news, this story of Jesus. And you're just a bit like, I trust you, but I can't believe you. I know you're well-meaning and everything, but I just can't believe it. I just don't believe it. And isn't it reassuring that the disciples, the closest ones in Jesus' life, actually had these exact same experiences that we ourselves have today? The reason Thomas did not believe them is because he had seen Jesus die, and he was not expecting Jesus to come back to life. The story is over. The dream is dead. John 21 tells us, about a week later, the disciples were in the house together, and this time Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus suddenly stood among them. "Peace be unto you." That's like first century speak for "don't freak out." This is Jesus's party trick. He just like shows up. He just appears at these gatherings. Poof, he's just there, straight through locked doors and everything. Whoa, he's just here. Hey, don't freak out. He just shows up. And Jesus says to Thomas, specifically to Thomas, Thomas, come here. Put your finger here. See my hands. Put your hand on my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said, oh my God, my God, my Lord, my God. You'll never believe this. Jesus understood that this is unbelievable. Jesus understood where Thomas was at in his faith. Jesus met Thomas exactly where he was at. And then, you'll never believe this. Jesus talks about us. Jesus then goes on to say, he says, Thomas, because you have seen me with your own eyes and have believed, but blessed are those who will believe even though they have not seen. See, Jesus knows this is a huge step. There are those who will choose to believe and follow Jesus even though they will not see. You'll never believe this. He's talking about us. You'll never believe this. He's talking about you. You are the one who will not see with your own eyes. You are the one who will not be able to touch his battle scars. You are the one who won't be able to touch the wounds of love. You are the one who won't be able to sit down and have a meal with Jesus. You see, one of the things that makes the story believable is that no one believed it. It was unbelievable to Jesus' friends and followers. They didn't believe it at first either. And maybe you feel like one of Jesus' skeptical followers. And maybe you would like to see some tangible proof, something that you can see and touch and feel. I get that. I understand that. And the reason you think that way is because you're a normal, rational human being. That's the way you're made. That's how we are wired. We do have proof in terms of ancient texts and records. Parts of the New Testament have been preserved more than any other ancient text. There's over 5,800 complete or fragmented Greek manuscripts. There's over 10,000 Latin manuscripts and 9,300 ancient manuscripts in other languages, such as Syriac, Slavic, Gothic, Ethiopic, Coptic, and Armenian. The New Testament as a text is single-handedly the most reliable ancient document in terms of the numbers of copies. Much more than Homer and Plato, Socrates, much more than any other ancient writer. The New Testament has a significantly vastly higher number of ancient texts that we have. Did you know a survey found in 2015 that here in England, 22% of adults actually believe that Jesus never lived, believe that he was never ever a real person? However, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, scholars agree that Jesus was a real person. They know that he's a real person because within a couple of decades after his life, he was being written about by other historians, Roman and Jewish historians, who were not followers of Jesus. Jesus is written about in other ancient documents. So from a historically verifiable point of view, we're able to verify that he was indeed a real, living, breathing person. And if you're skeptical, take some time to investigate. Jesus didn't ridicule those who were skeptical or doubting. He didn't belittle people. Remember the way he treated Mary? Mary's looking at him and she doesn't see him. And instead of making her feel like a fool, he makes her feel like a child, a loved child that's just so upset that she can't see and think because of all the feelings that are raging inside her. Think about the way he treated Thomas. He didn't belittle Thomas and say, "You stupid fool, why didn't you believe your friends?" You know, your friends who love you have been telling you this for ages and you haven't even believed them. No, he didn't belittle Thomas. He actually met Thomas with grace and care. And that's how Jesus meets us today, with our skeptical feelings, with our doubts. He meets us with grace. He doesn't belittle us and treat us like an idiot. He actually meets us with grace. He doesn't ridicule us. He gave us the space for us to experience and learn and discover more of who he was. He was so gracious, even to his closest friends, the ones who should have known better, the ones who should have recognized him. He gave them the space to work through their unbelief. You know, another reason people believe is that this is a movement that never should have survived. See, Rome was the global power at that time. And when Jesus died, everything should have finished. It never should have carried on. But somehow a small gathering of ordinary men and women ended up turning the world upside down. All because they believed in something which was so unbelievable. They didn't just believe that Jesus was a good teacher. They didn't just believe that he was a kind man. They actually believed that Jesus had risen from the dead. This one event was the main event that shaped everything about their life, which gave them a confidence to face the future. Everything made sense after the resurrection. Jesus coming back to life was the event that changed their life. The event that was supposed to be the end was instead the beginning. That which was supposed to be death was actually life. We're going to play a short video now. And while this video plays, I'd like you to think about and consider some of the things that we've been speaking about this morning. And this video highlights what the cross was intended for, but in reality, what the cross actually was for. That which was the end was actually the beginning. We'll just play the video now.
The cross. It was meant to horrify the world. It was meant for humiliation. It was meant to last for days. It was meant for slow asphyxiation. It was meant to prolong torture. It was the Roman soldier's job. It was meant to be used by Caesar, but instead, it was used by God. It was meant to stop a movement, but instead, it became the way. It was meant to act on fear, but instead, it awakened faith. It was meant to be vicious and violent, but instead, it became our peace. It was meant to uproot hope, but instead, it became the seed. It was meant to punish captives, but instead it unleashed freedom. It was meant to build up Rome, but instead it built God's kingdom. It was meant to discourage rebels. It was meant to stop insurrection. It was meant to put down Jesus, but instead it set up his resurrection. It was meant to jeer and mock him, but instead it was his glory. It was meant to erase a chapter, but instead it became the story. It was meant to hold up convicts, but instead it raised up a king. It was meant to shut our mouth, but instead it's why we sing. It was meant to be a judgment, but instead it became our mercy. It's why the song of heaven is the Lamb. The Lamb is worthy. It was meant to kill an enemy, crush dissenters and diversion, but instead it became the banner of God's love for every person. It was meant to be appalling, nailing hands and feet to wood. It was meant to be used for evil, but instead it was used for good. It was meant to be a symbol of God's assassination, but instead it became the symbol of Jesus' invitation. Come to the cross. Instead of sin and stain, you are meant to be made clean. Instead of being forgotten, you are meant to know you're seen. Instead of being ashamed, you can leave behind your guilt. Instead of feeling empty, you were meant to be fulfilled. Instead of being broken, you are meant to be made whole. Here, Calvary is calling. It beckons you. Behold, come to the cross. Instead of being an accident, you have a purpose and a plan. Instead of being abandoned, you were chosen by his hand. For all who've said I can't, God has said I can. No matter what you've done, the invitation stands. Come to the cross. Instead of being doubtful, you are meant to know your Father. You are meant to be his son, and you are meant to be his daughter. You were cherished from the start. You were always in the picture. Instead of being a victim, you were meant to be a victor. The result of Jesus' blood, salvation has arrived. Instead of being dead, you are meant to be alive. The cross. It was meant to signal death, but instead, it's a sign of living. It was meant to be the end, but instead, it's our beginning.
Today is an invitation. Today is the next day of the rest of our lives for each of us. In a moment, we're going to sing a song. And in this song of worship, it has these words. It says, I was breathing, but not alive. All my failures, I tried to hide. It was my tomb until I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. These words can be your story. Today, these words can be your testimony. You can say to others, you'll never believe this, but my life is totally changed. I found a new way of living and loving. Death doesn't even frighten me anymore. You'll never believe this. You know, if you're watching live and you would like prayer or you would like to find out more about Jesus, I'd like to ask you to do something bold right now, which is go ahead and put that in the chat. Reach out in the chat. And someone will get in touch with you. We've got people in place to be able to contact you and to get in touch with you. But if this is you today and you'd like to find out more about Jesus, or you'd like prayer for something, please just put that in the comment in the chat and we will reach out to you. We're going to just worship together now. On this Easter Sunday, we're going to sing Glorious Day.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all I know. The only you, Jesus, when I met you, you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, then I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Thank you, Father.
I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, but you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Thank you, Jesus.
Another thing that we've got going on, if you are interested in discovering more about what it means to follow Jesus, we are so excited to be running an Alpha course. Now, Alpha is a group where you can ask any question that you like. It's for anyone who's got anything that they would like to know about what it means to follow Jesus. And we'd love for you to join us on that. It starts on the 15th of April. And it's a safe place where you can come and ask any questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. After the service, we are going to be opening our foyer, which is for 30 minutes. It's on Zoom immediately after we finish this. And you can join us live in the foyer. It's kind of like our digital lounge, if you like. And the foyer is open. You can just jump in there, say hello, gather with people. You can see some faces. And also, if there's anything that you'd like to speak to somebody about that might have been prompted from today with the service, then please get in touch. Now, be blessed. Have a wonderful week, wonderful rest of the day, whatever you've got planned, whatever you've got going on. And we'll see you here again next Sunday for 10:20. So have a great week. Bye-bye.